So as many of us do, I sit around and scour Facebook at night while I'm hanging out, and I'm always looking for a deal or a project or something fun that it might be to add into the garage. I came across this. This is a 2014 genuine Roughhouse two-stroke 50cc scooter. Now, it came from Florida originally. It's been up here in Tennessee now for a few years, and as you can tell, it's seen some better days. We've got surface rust, we've got dirt and debris kind of scattered around it just because it lived on a farm. The guy said it ran. He wasn't asking much for it. We talked him down a little bit. He told me it ran. He tried to fire it up when we were there on his farm. Now, it didn't fire up, and that could be that it was 31 degrees here in the great state of Tennessee. It could be that the battery was toast and he was trying to kick it. It could be that there's a multitude of problems within here that I haven't even discovered yet. But for the price, I figured, what the heck, this could be a fun wintertime project. I'll still ride the other scooter, the Royal Alloy, maybe my Yamaha motorcycle, as much as I can. I do use my Royal Alloy 150 as the daily commuter for me. I don't own a car. My wife and I have one truck, and then our little fleet of motorcycles and scooters here. But I like something to work on, and I thought this might be fun for me, and it might be fun for anybody who wants to come along and see what it takes. If you can find something sitting on Facebook, sitting on Craigslist, that hasn't quite been loved. It hasn't been given the home it deserves. And we're going to start with this Buddy 50, and we'll see. Maybe we'll take it from there to go somewhere else. I may end up keeping it. I may end up getting it running and cleaned up and sell it. But that's to be determined. I may end up keeping it. I may end up getting it cleaned up and running and sell it again so I can buy something else. I don't know. That's to be determined. But what we do have here is a prime example of a two-stroke genuine scooter in relatively okay shape. Yeah, the signals are falling off. They were held on by Scotch tape. I will clarify, they were attached when I picked it up. I put it in the truck and drove it here, and that Scotch tape didn't hold up to highway speeds. We've got a stuck front brake, or a dragging front brake. I don't know if it's quite stuck, but after I rolled it off the truck, it was dragging on the leaves. It was going everywhere. We've got a broken lever. We've got rusty wheels. It had a dead battery. There's dirt all over it. But that's okay. This should be a fun time for us to see what can we do to bring this back to life for a couple $100. I mean, I picked it up for $500. You can sell a few things you've got laying around that you might not be using anymore. I sold a radar detector. I covered half my scooter. Sure, I'm gonna have $50 into a battery. I'll probably put new tires on it. There's another $100. Some brake pads, an air filter. I might be into this for another $300, $350 to keep it stock. I could go all out. I could do the Stage 2 kit from Scooterworks, which is a pipe, a 70 kit, some transmission stuff. Maybe we'll do that. But we're going to break it down into a couple of, I hesitate to call them episodes, but let's call them episodes. So the first thing we're going to do is in this video, go around it, take a look at the scooter, see what we're working with. After that, we'll get it running and rolling. Then we'll get it cleaned up a little bit. And then we'll start working on some of the more necessary cosmetics as we do turn signals, replace that stuff. But should be a fun project. Hopefully you guys want to see it, want to stick around and learn something with me. So let's go ahead, let's take a tour around our Roughhouse and see what we're working with today. Before we dive into all the specifics of it, let's talk about what we know. So we know that it should have been running very recently. He said he and his wife were riding it pretty regularly, but he couldn't get it to start that morning. Quite possibly true. We do know that he reminded me a number of times that he was only putting 89 octane in it when it calls for 93 octane. Not the end of the world. We'll drain the tank. We know that the brake lever is broken. We did find that out when we got there, but we've got a broken brake lever here that controls our drum in the rear. We can tell from looking at it that it's dirty. It quite hasn't been loved the way I think a scooter should be loved. The tires are worn out. But other than that, the plastics are all intact. There's not any big cracks or scrapes on it. A couple little scuffs and scratches here and there, but not a big deal. We know the turn signals are broken, and we know the battery was toast. So on the way home, I stopped at Batteries Plus, pulled the battery tray out of the floor, traded that in as my core charge so I didn't have to front them $10, and brought that home. We got that on the battery tender over there, so we'll go through this, take a look at some of the specifics of what we're dealing with, and make a list of how we're going to go about this. Okay, so here's our genuine Roughhouse 50. We can tell up top, right here, plastics are pretty faded. We've got some mud, we've got some debris. Just general, it lived on a farm. Surface rust on the wheel here. I do have it strapped down to the bench. It's a pretty lightweight scooter. Coming around this way, surface rust on our exhaust, more surface rust on our wheel. We've got the tires, which are pretty worn down. They've got mud on them. Both the turn signals are broken off. They did have tape on them. That tape, as I mentioned, did not hold up to being trailered. Coming up this way, the scooter's got, about 4,000 miles on it. Gauges are clear, they're not scratched up. Our front signals, well, those are pretty good. Still attached. Coming down, we got the nice little Roughhouse 50 face. Looking pretty good, lights are intact, bulb is there. Everything seems pretty well in order. Now, I did mention, we knew that the battery was toast when we got it, so I pulled this battery out, and I picked up a new one at Batteries Plus. Things like our floorboard. That's not slotted in all the way properly. We're missing the screw here for our 2-stroke oil reserve. Our little cubby is in place, our 12-volt outlet is there, controls are there, and other than our busted brake lever, we seem to be pretty good there. So this is just the cable brake lever, snapped clean in half. So we'll have to go ahead and replace that, but we can order one of those on Amazon. Coming this way, the seat doesn't have any rips or tears in it. It opens just fine if you put the key in here and turn it, so that'll pop it up. It's a little tight to close, but that might just need to be lubricated. There's our original dealer tag, purchased in Sarasota, Florida. Again, more just dirt, kind of grime stuck up in there. We'll give it a deep clean. Fuel tank here. We're going to empty that out and put fresh gas in. Everything else seems to be mechanically there. All things considered, it's a relatively handsome scooter. 50cc 2-stroke from Genuine means it should do probably 45 with my shaved ape self on it. We'll get it cleaned up and decide if we're going to keep it, we're going to sell it, we're going to modify it. Should be a pretty fun project for us to go through. With all of those things considered, so first step is going to be put the battery in and see if we get any sort of electrical signals. If that gets the scooter to at least turn on a little bit and we can try to get it to turn over, that's going to tell us what sort of situation we're looking at. If we can't, we'll dive into the electrics. If we can get power to the scooter and we can get the starter to bump, maybe we can get it to run. If we can get it to run, then we can get into doing things like spark plug, air filter, 2-stroke oil. One thing I do want to do pretty quick here is going to be drain that fuel tank. But before I get that out and I start getting the garage all fumey, because it's 30-some degrees outside in Tennessee, we're going to see about getting the scooter turning over. We'll make a game plan from there, but first thing that we're going to do, grab the battery off the tender and install it in the Roughhouse. Now, I mentioned I'd already removed the battery in a Batteries Plus parking lot while this was strapped down in the back of my truck and exchanged it for my new one. It's a tiny little battery on these scooters. It's a tiny little battery. And that's all we need to get this thing turned over, and then it'll support itself. So I put this in on the tender overnight, and we're going to go ahead. We're going to put this into the scooter, and we'll see if that gives us any sort of electricity so we can see if the scooter will start up. All right, battery's installed. Tightened up nice and good. I did put the battery tender connections on there. It's in the scooter already, so why not? What we're going to do now, put you guys up nice and high and see if we can't get any lights on the dash. And if we do, maybe we can get this thing to kick over. Do you feel high yet? You should. You're way up there. Got the battery in. Got our key in the ignition. Let's turn it on and see what we get. We do get our oil light to come on. We do get our blinkers to blink. Horn works. That's a good sign. All right, kill switch in the run position. Brake engaged. Hey, there we go. Well, it turns out we've got a running scooter with a $50 battery. Well, that's a pretty good day. But let's go ahead and make sure everything looks like it's supposed to. However, I'm already in a really good mood about this. Okay, so the scooter's running briefly. But before I run it anymore, I want to do a couple things. I'd really like to drain the fuel. All right, so quick overview of what we're going to do. We've got a 12 mil, a 10 mil, a Phillips screwdriver, and some assorted power tools. We're going to knock the rear rack off with these two fasteners. We're going to undo fasteners here, inside the bucket, those two,
This whole thing's gonna come out. We've got a fastener here. Once we've got this out of the way, we've got a couple of fasteners on the inside. This whole piece from here all the way back to here is gonna pull out, and we're gonna have nice, easy access to work on the engine, to check the carburetor, to drain the fuel tank, replace the fuel filter, do all of that stuff. So we'll put you up in the corner and let you watch. Okay, now we've got fender, all of our body up here out of the way, and we've got really good access to where our engine is. Carburetor, airbox, two-stroke oil tank, which is very full. And one thing I noticed right away, my fuel filter, very hard to see on camera, is orientated the wrong direction. So the arrow is pointing up the line instead of down the line. So that could be part of an issue if it's not getting a lot of fuel. Got a new one of those. It also looks like it may have a little sludge in there. We're gonna first start by draining the fuel tank, pop that off and drain it into a container. Once that's off, we're gonna get the carburetor out of the way and see if we can't get things cleaned up a little bit. All right, so we drained the fuel tank, we popped the fuel line off, got that out of the way, and then we just actually dropped off the whole petcock assembly there. Looking at the color of this fuel, has a bit of that bluish glow. Makes me think that at some point this guy who owned it before me probably put in some two-stroke oil right into the gas, thinking it was a pre-mixed vehicle, not with a separate oil injection system. So hopefully getting this stuff out of there, getting a tank of fresh 93, no ethanol in here, will help us get it running. The next step here is going to be getting the carb out and just making sure it's not all gunked up. So to do that, pull the airbox off, remove it from the manifold going into the motor, and then we can get that carb out and take a look at what's going on in there, probably hit it with a little bit of carb cleaner, and put it back together. So I'm going to pull the carburetor off, get that cleaned out, and then we'll put everything back in. I had a spare fuel filter and hoses from a carburetor I purchased for the Royal Alloy, so I'm using that in place of the factory crusty hoses here and the filter that was connected the wrong direction. So with that out of the way and some new hoses in, once we get the carb cleaned out, we'll see if we've got a better running scooter. That's going to be the goal for today, is just to get this motor running. Now that we've got the float ball off of the carburetor, we can see all of that buildup in there. No well-running and respected scooter, something like this genuine Roughhouse, should be treated to the point where that float ball is going to end up full of this junk. And we can see it here, our jets, our float, everything is just kind of grody. But this tells me that the scooter certainly was not loved the way it should have been. So we're going to go ahead, pull the throttle cable off here, disconnect our electric choke cable up here, get the carb all the way out of the scooter, and give this at least a little bit of cleaning, a little bit of love. I mean, we can see just what poured out of the remnants of the float bowl had all this junk and sand. I mean, that's sand. There's no question to me that that's sand from being at the beach in Florida and not being cared for. Oh boy, it's a sad day. Okay, we've got our airbox here. This is the orientation it was in the scooter. I mean, that's full of oily, oily discharge. We've got some gunk up here. Smells like old fuel. Pull the air filter back. That's not terribly dirty, but certainly this whole apparatus here has seen better days. So all of this stuff in here is indicative of an unloved scoot. We're gonna work on that. We're gonna get this taken care of. But first, pop the carburetor out and get it cleaned up before we do anything else. Well, with that process complete, we've now changed our fuel line, changed our fuel filter. We cleaned out the carburetor. You saw that gunk in there. We tried cleaning out the jets as best we could. Cleaned out the air box where there was some oil and vapor stuff in there. We'll replace the air filter soon. I have to order that. We may replace the carburetor. But with all of that done, we're going to put a little bit of fuel in here, and we're going to see if this thing wants to start up for us. This will be our test of if we've made any improvements here. Now, as you may or may not know, it's, I think, very important to christen your new vehicle by filling it up for the first time and spilling gas everywhere. Or if you're using one of these new eco-friendly gas cans and you have to figure it out every time. Made a little bit of a mess, but we wiped it up. We've got the door open. We've now got fuel in the gas tank. We should see fuel come into our line once we get it turning over, but let's go ahead, put the key in the ignition and see what happens. Turn our key on, kill switch, and let's find out. We've got fuel into our filter. Alright, so off camera, I played with this a little bit, trying to figure it out, used some starting fluid, covered this up some, just trying to figure out what's going on. I have raw fuel coming out of the carburetor inlet when I shut it down or when it shuts down. So I'm guessing that float in there in the carb is pretty stuck open. So we'll do some online shopping, we'll figure it out. But we do have right now the ability to turn the key on, and we have a running scooter. Then it shuts off on us. Little whip juice. But I think it's running pretty rich, and we get a little fuel coming out here. So we'll go ahead, we'll put a new carburetor in it. However, good news is we've got a running scooter to a pretty good degree here. So we're gonna go ahead and end off the video at this point until those new parts come in. But should give you a sense of what we're gonna be doing to this thing here. And we'll get this buddy Roughhouse back on the road and riding the way it's supposed to in no time.